These days, Disney dominates the box office every year with Marvel and Star Wars movies. But there was a time when the studio couldn't make a successful action movie to save its life. So let's take a look at all the times Disney came close to financial ruin by putting all their money into action movies that crashed and burned. Disney's first major attempt to capitalize on the success of Star Wars was a surprisingly grim, high-concept outer space adventure with an all-star cast. The most expensive movie Disney had ever made at that point, the black hole made comparative chump change at the box office and quickly fell into relative obscurity.
Ha! Impossible!
In CONDORMAN, the creator of a comic book hero must assume the identity of his creation to stop an evil Soviet conspiracy. Yes, folks, this is what a Disney superhero movie used to look like. Declared one of the worst films of the year by Siskel and Ebert, it lost the studio almost $10 million, which was quite a lot back then.
Are you serious?
Incredible visual effects and a clever story couldn't save DRAGONSLAYER. The film cost $18 million and only made $14 million back. Premiering right after Raiders of the Lost Ark and Superman 2 probably didn't help either. Disney took audiences inside the world of computer programs in Tron, a landmark in terms of visual effects, which only grossed $33 million in theaters. Like several of the films on this list, Tron eventually developed a cult following, but more on that in a bit.
Damn it!
The Black Cauldron was the first Disney animated film to receive a PG rating, the first Disney animated film to utilize CG imagery, and the most expensive animated motion picture ever made at the time. And it only made about half its budget back, almost bankrupting the studio's animation department in the process. Disney didn't even bother releasing the film on home video until the late 1990s. Disney animation experienced a renaissance a few years after Black Cauldron with films like The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. But they weren't all hits, and this sequel to 1977's The Rescuers only made $27 million at the box office. It also had the bad luck of opening against the mega hit Home Alone. Although many now consider The Rocketeer one of the best early superhero movies, Disney's adaptation grossed only $46 million from a budget of $40 million, which is hardly the kind of profit that blockbuster franchises are made of. Mighty Joe Young was an expensive remake of a 1949 Giant Ape movie. It cost $90 million and made only $50 million back, and while it gave Charlize Theron her first starring role and earned an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects, the film otherwise pretty quickly disappeared into the pop culture ether.
I say that's the biggest load of crap I ever heard in my whole life.
This Stargate-esque animated film cost somewhere between $90 to $120 million and made a somewhat respectable $180 million. But Disney had bigger plans for Atlantis than that, including an Atlantis-themed addition to their Disneyland theme park and a tie-in television series. Both were cancelled. This steampunk adaptation of Treasure Island came complete with space travel, cyborgs, and aliens. It got some good reviews and still has its fans, but at the time it only grossed $110 million off a budget of $140 million and was considered one of the biggest flops in Disney history. Plans for a sequel had been underway, but were cancelled after release. This odd adaptation of Jules Verne's globetrotting adventure stars Steve Coogan as an eccentric hot air ballooner and Jackie Chan as his kick-butt sidekick. It cost $110 million, made a measly $72 million, and nobody seems to talk about it anymore, which is probably how Disney prefers it.
I'm such a fool, always embarrassing myself in front of visiting dignitaries.
One of the most expensive video game adaptations ever was also one of Disney's biggest bombs. The $200 million film earned only $336 million at the box office, which actually makes it one of the highest grossing video game movies ever, but not nearly enough to get a Prince of Persia 2. Let's just say 2010 was not a good year for Disney. In addition to Prince of Persia, Disney unsuccessfully tried to transform a sketch from Fantasia into a blockbuster action franchise starring Nicolas Cage. Bad reviews and a gross of $210 million off a budget of $150 million prove that some classic animated scenes are better off not being remade with Nick Cage.
Excuse me?
I love them.
As we noted earlier, Tron developed a cult following over the years. So much so that Disney finally greenlit this sequel some 30 years after the original. And it actually made $400 million off a budget of $170 million. So not bad, but not enough to convince Disney the audience wanted more movies. A short-lived spin-off TV series was made, and a movie sequel was in development for a while, but the franchise seems to have finally fallen into the depths of development hell. Edgar Rice Burroughs' classic John Carter sci-fi novels directly inspired Superman, Star Wars, and many other sci-fi stories of the 20th century. Unfortunately, by the time John Carter himself was adapted, the ideas no longer seemed unique or original. Reviews were bad, and the film earned an international total of $284 million off a budget of $263 million, not to mention the roughly $350 million Disney spent advertising. Perhaps it's no surprise that later that year they just bought Star Wars instead. The Lone Ranger tried to do for cowboys what Pirates of the Caribbean did for pirates. It didn't work. The film only made $10 million more than its budget, not including the $150 million plus in marketing costs. Also, it received terrible reviews. But hey, maybe there's a mega cowboy franchise out there that Disney could buy next. Those are Disney's biggest action movie flops. But since this is Disney, we're sure you have a favorite or two among them, so let's all reminisce in the comments. For even more movie failures, check out our list of the worst video game adaptations and the best bad movies ever made. And don't forget to like and subscribe to IGN on all your favorite platforms.